Hi, this is Carl, and this is part 2 of the discussion on linguagenesis methodology and teaching methodology. I mentioned in part 1, I gave you a background about myself and what I did. I also told you about the languages which I studied at school, at college and at university. What I want to do here in part 2 is to discuss with you my learning of French, my third modern foreign language, which I began in June 2005. And what I'll begin by saying is that throughout the 10 years or so that I studied German and Spanish, and I will admit that despite teaching German and Spanish, I'm still studying both languages, obviously in terms of vocabulary rather than any form of grammar structures. Throughout the 10 years from when I first started to learn German in 1993 and also Spanish from 1996 all the way through to 2004, while I obviously at one stage had a realization that I had a knack for modern foreign languages, and hence that was the reason why I decided to study both languages at college and then later at university. On no occasion did I give any thought as to why I had the ability in a modern foreign language or modern foreign languages. And at the same time, when people used to come up to me and say, I really admire you for being able to speak a modern foreign language, it's not my cup of tea, or I've never had a knack for modern foreign languages. When I first started to learn French in, as I said, June 2005, one of the reasons for me choosing to do this was, as I was trying to research into means, effective and simplified means by which people could try to learn modern foreign languages, what I wanted to do was to try and become aware, whilst I was learning French, even the basics from the very start. I wanted to try to gain a realization and a recognition of why I was able to take in vocabulary and language structures of the French language, which I was able to do so with the Michel Thomas course. And what I was hoping was that at the end of the 8-hour course, and then obviously later on at the end of the 5-hour course, was to try and come up with some evaluation or some conclusions as to the conscious approach which I was using to take in the vocabulary, and then hopefully in the awareness that I was able to take in the vocabulary and the structure of the language and the phrases in a particular way, that I could share this information with other students, which would help them to develop a positive attitude towards the learning process and learn effectively by the similar standards. And obviously we're not talking simply about the benefits of any course or product. We're also concerned with the attitude of the student from the outset, the mindset of the student, and the elimination of any doubts or hesitation or despondency, any negativity or pessimism which the learner has about learning a modern foreign language, and ways in which the learner can try to get rid of and erase any of these negative connotations which are traditionally associated with learning a modern foreign language. And French at the same time was a language which intrigued me because many people were surprised that I'd never learned French at secondary school, because apparently during my era, when I was aged between 11 and 16, the majority of people were actually learning French as the first modern foreign language at secondary school, whereas in my case the school year was divided up. Half of the pupils began to learn German and the other half began to learn French, and then after a few years, if you were comfortable and able in either of those two modern foreign languages, you have the opportunity to study Spanish, which I chose to do. And French as the third modern foreign language intrigued me because I knew obviously a few phrases to begin with, but what really appealed to me in some strange way was the fact that French is not a phonetically correct language. Obviously you're not pronouncing all the letters which you see written down in a verbal manner, and therefore I thought that by learning French solely from the spoken source rather than from the written source, that this would help me to develop an oral linguistic proficiency in French, which had I started out by trying to master the pronunciation and the sound of the words from the written language, might not have been as effective, because I've always been used to, or prior to learning French, I was always used to learning two modern foreign languages which were phonetically correct, German and Spanish, both of them being phonetically correct. So I thought that if I tried to shun away as far as possible from looking at written French words, then this would help me to learn French as far as possible. But it's quite interesting when I began to learn French, some of the things which were happening inside my mind. Obviously, most people regard themselves as being visual learners. They feel as though they have to write things down before they say them, or they much prefer to base their learning on written exercises and reading exercises than they do listening and speaking exercises, which many people, which many learners seem to think are their weakest areas out of the four aspects or four senses of learning modern foreign languages: speaking, listening, reading and writing. So, as I say, by learning French and just getting the sounds of the words and repeating the sounds of the words using the Michel Thomas methodology, that was enabling me to become used to the sounds of the words and the intonation, and develop confidence and positive attitude towards constructing phrases of an ever-increasing length. But what happens to me when I'm learning from the Michel Thomas methodology is that the words are said, and then immediately what I try to do is to create a visual reference within my mind, which is some kind of representation of what I imagine the spelling of that word to be, even if the spelling of the word which is being said, or the spellings of the words which make up a phrase have been said, aren't always correct. And it's quite intriguing that despite the fact that when you go to a dictionary or to a phrase book and you look up the written representations of these words, just how wrong, well, particularly in my case, just how wrong I was about the spellings of those particular words. But it was really interesting to note just the fact that this didn't cause any detriment whatsoever to my learning, even despite the fact that I thought that having a visual representation of a written word on my mind about whose spelling I was completely unsure, and then going, as I say, to a dictionary, a bilingual dictionary or a phrase book, and then seeing just how differently the word was spelt, that didn't have any effect or detriment on my learning of the modern foreign language whatsoever. But obviously, by making use of not only the Michel Thomas course but also phrase books, I was then able to make use of both the oral language and the written language to gain confidence in mastering the rules of pronunciation, and also the intonation, and then analysing, as my vocabulary increased, the literal translations of phrases and acquiring vocabulary in that manner. So that's basically how my interest in French developed, and it carried on from June 2005, and I've now reached a degree where I'm very confident in using the language, but because I'm not using it as often as I maybe should be doing, especially because I don't teach it, I still feel as though from time to time I should be going back to the CDs by Michel Thomas, or to another audio course, back to the phrase books, and trying to remember the vocabulary, or at least getting used to saying the phrases and increasing the speed at which I'm saying the phrases, to try to just egg on and push on just a little bit more the fluency, which is more typical of somebody who is advanced in the French language.